My mother-in-law handed me an envelope at my wedding reception and whispered, "Open this when you need to remember your place." I smiled, tucked it away, and forgot about it for 3 years. Until the day I finally opened it and discovered the twisted game she had been playing with my marriage from the very beginning. What I found inside that envelope didn't just expose her manipulation, it unraveled an entire family's carefully constructed lie. And by the time I was done, she lost more than just control. She lost everything she thought made her untouchable. If you've ever dealt with someone who used kindness as a weapon and family as a cage, stay with me. Because what started with one sealed envelope ended with an entire family tree getting cut down to its roots. My name is Rachel, I'm 31 years old, and I learned something important 3 years into my marriage. Sometimes the most dangerous people in your life are the ones everyone else thinks are saints. When I married David, his mother Patricia made sure everyone knew she was thrilled. She threw us an engagement party, helped plan the wedding, even cried during our vows. At the reception, she pulled me aside near the gift table, pressed a cream-colored envelope into my hands, and said those words I'll never forget. "Open this when you need to remember your place." She said it with a smile, the kind that photographs well. I assumed it was some heartfelt letter about becoming part of the family, so I thanked her, slipped it into my purse, and honestly forgot it existed. Life moved fast after that. David and I bought a small house across town, I started a new job at a marketing firm, and we fell into the rhythm of building our own life together. But Patricia was always there. Not in an obvious, overbearing way. She was subtle. She'd drop by with home-cooked meals and stay just long enough to comment on how I stored leftovers wrong. She'd offer decorating advice and somehow make our furniture choices feel like personal failures. When David got promoted at work, she threw him a celebration dinner and forgot to mention it to me until the day of. Every time I brought it up to David, he'd say the same thing. "That's just how Mom is. She means well." I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Nothing she did was outright cruel, but I always left her presence feeling smaller. Like I was auditioning for a role in my own marriage and failing. 3 years in, things finally came to a head. David and I had been trying to start a family, and after months of negative tests and doctor visits, we decided to take a break from trying and just enjoy our life together. We didn't make a big announcement. It was personal, between us. 2 weeks later, at Sunday dinner at Patricia's house, she stood up during dessert, clinked her glass, and made a toast. "To David," she said, her voice warm and proud. "For being patient with a wife who can't seem to give him the one thing every man deserves. A child to carry on his name." The room went silent. David's father looked at his plate. David's sister stared at her wine glass. And I just sat there, heat rising to my face, trying to process what had just happened. David cleared his throat. "Mom, that's not appropriate." Patricia waved him off with a delicate hand. "Oh sweetheart, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Rachel knows we love her. But at some point, you have to wonder if you made the right choice." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I looked at David, waiting for him to defend me, to shut this down completely. But he just sat there, torn between his wife and his mother, frozen in the middle. I grabbed my purse and walked out. David found me sitting in the car 20 minutes later. He got in the passenger seat and said, "I'm sorry. She crossed a line." "She didn't cross a line," I said quietly. "She's been crossing lines for 3 years. This is just the first time she did it where you couldn't pretend you didn't see it." We drove home in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every small moment, every comment, every time Patricia had made me feel less than. And then I remembered the envelope. I got out of bed, went to my closet, and dug through the box where I kept wedding memories. The envelope was still there, cream-colored and sealed, my name written in Patricia's perfect handwriting across the front. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of stationery with a handwritten note. But it wasn't the sentimental welcome I'd imagined. It was something else entirely. The note said, "Rachel, by the time you read this, you'll already know that you were never supposed to last. David needs someone stronger, someone from a better background, someone who understands what it means to be part of a family like ours. I gave you time to prove me wrong. If you're reading this now, it means you didn't. Remember, you're replaceable. I've made sure of it." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. This wasn't a moment of anger or a reaction to something I'd done. This was premeditated. She had written this on my wedding day, sealed it, and handed it to me like a delayed punishment. And then I noticed something else. At the bottom of the page, in smaller print, she had written, "P.S. David doesn't know about the trust." The trust. I had no idea what that meant. But I knew someone who might. The next morning, I called David's sister, Michelle. We'd always gotten along, though she kept her distance from family drama. When I told her about the letter, she went quiet for a long time. "She really gave you that?" Michelle finally asked, her voice strained. "On my wedding day," I confirmed. "What's the trust, Michelle?" Another pause. "Then, you need to talk to Dad." David's father, Robert, was the quiet one in the family. He let Patricia run the show and rarely pushed back. But when I called him and mentioned the letter and the trust, something in his tone shifted. "Meet me for coffee," he said. "Alone. Don't tell Patricia." We met at a small place downtown the next afternoon. Robert looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that wasn't just physical. He slid a folder across the table. "This is a copy of the family trust documents," he said. "Patricia's been managing it for years. David is the primary beneficiary, but there are conditions." I opened the folder and started reading. The trust was substantial, set up by David's grandparents, meant to provide financial security for future generations. But Patricia had added clauses over the years, amendments that gave her control over distributions. And then I saw it. Buried in the legal language was a clause that stated if David's marriage ended within the first 5 years, the full trust would remain under Patricia's sole discretion indefinitely. If the marriage lasted beyond 5 years, control would transfer to David. "She's been betting on us failing," I said slowly, the realization settling in. "She set me up to fail so she could keep control of the money." Robert nodded, looking ashamed. "She's convinced herself she's protecting David. But really, she just can't let go." I went home and showed David everything. The letter, the trust documents, the timeline. At first, he didn't want to believe it. This was his mother, the woman who raised him, who threw him that celebration dinner, who always said she just wanted the best for him. But the evidence was right there in black and white. And slowly, I watched him start to see the pattern I'd been living with for 3 years. "I need to talk to her," David said finally, his voice hollow. "No," I replied. "We need to talk to a lawyer first." We hired someone who specialized in family trusts and asset management. She reviewed everything and confirmed what we suspected. Patricia had been manipulating the trust structure for years, making it nearly impossible for David to access what was rightfully his unless he followed her unspoken rules. "Here's the good news," the lawyer said. "The original trust document supersedes her amendments. Your grandparents' intentions were clear. She's been operating in a legal gray area, and if you challenge it, you'll win." David and I spent a week talking, planning, and making hard decisions. Finally, we agreed. We weren't just going to challenge the trust. We were going to reset every boundary Patricia had trampled. David called a family meeting at Patricia's house. She was thrilled, probably thinking he was finally coming to his senses and leaving me. When we walked in together, holding hands, her smile faltered just slightly. David's father was there. Michelle and her husband. Even Patricia's sister, who rarely got involved in family matters. David stood at the head of the table and placed the folder down. I know about the trust, he said simply. I know about the amendments, the conditions, and the letter you gave Rachel on our wedding day. Patricia's face went pale, then flushed red. I don't know what she's told you, but... She didn't tell me, David interrupted. You did. You wrote it down and handed it to her. You've been sabotaging my marriage from day one because you couldn't stand to lose control. The room was so quiet you could hear the wall clock ticking. I've spoken to a lawyer, David continued. The amendments you made to the trust are being challenged. But more than that, I'm done pretending this is normal. You don't get to control my life, my marriage, or my future anymore. Patricia stood up, shaking. I did everything for you. I protected you. I built this family. No, David said, his voice steady. You built a cage and called it love. Michelle spoke up then, her voice quiet but firm. She did the same thing to me, David. When I married Greg, she tried to convince me he wasn't good enough. She offered me money to postpone the wedding. I thought I was the only one. Patricia looked around the table, searching for allies, but everyone was staring at her with varying degrees of recognition and disappointment. Within weeks, the trust situation was resolved. The lawyer filed the necessary paperwork, and the amendments Patricia had made were nullified. David gained full control of what his grandparents had left for him, and Patricia's financial grip evaporated. But the bigger shift was in our lives. David and I stopped going to Sunday dinners. We stopped answering every phone call and text. We built boundaries with steel in them, and for the first time in our marriage, we had space to breathe. Patricia tried everything. Apologies that came with conditions. Gifts that felt like bribes. She even showed up at our house unannounced, crying on the porch about how we were abandoning her. David looked at her through the screen door and said, "You taught me that family is everything. You were right. That's why I'm choosing the family I built with Rachel over the one you tried to control." We didn't hear from her for months after that. During that quiet time, something beautiful happened. David and I reconnected in ways we hadn't since before we got married. We laughed more. We made plans that didn't require anyone's approval. And eventually, after we'd stopped trying so hard and started just living, I got pregnant. When our daughter was born, we named her Clara, after David's grandmother, the woman who'd set up the trust with love, not control. We sent Patricia a birth announcement, nothing more. She sent back a card with a short note. I'm sorry for everything. I hope one day you'll let me meet her. David and I talked about it. We agreed that if Patricia wanted to be part of Clara's life, it would be on our terms. Supervised visits. Clear boundaries. No manipulation, no guilt, no games. The first time Patricia held Clara, she cried. Real tears, not the performative kind. She's beautiful, she whispered. She is, I agreed. And she's going to grow up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions. Patricia looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen before. Regret. I don't know if people like Patricia ever fully change. But I do know that I'm not responsible for fixing her or managing her feelings. My job is to protect my family, the one I chose and the one I'm raising. That envelope she gave me on my wedding day was supposed to remind me of my place. And in a strange way, it did. It reminded me that my place isn't beneath anyone. It's beside my husband, in our home, raising our daughter with the kind of love that doesn't need to control to exist. If you've ever felt like you're fighting for your worth in a relationship or a family that keeps moving the goalposts, I want you to hear this. You're not imagining it. You're not too sensitive. And you're not alone. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop playing a game you were never meant to win. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally? How did you find the courage to finally say enough is enough? If this story resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a second to like this video. It helps more people who might need to hear this find it. And if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and building the life you deserve, consider subscribing. I share new stories every week, and I read every single comment. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself. And remember, you deserve respect, not just from others, but from yourself too.